All right. Well, first off, my name is Rob Corzola. I'm the Director of Sales for Arcadis Gen in North America. And joining me today is Dan Scott from the UK. He's our Director of Analytics. And I do want to thank the Maximo user community for affording us this opportunity, as well as ZPro, one of our strategic partners in this sector, for also making us aware of this opportunity and helping us be here today. So with that, we have a number of, not a lot of slides, but we wanted to hopefully provide you some valuable content about who we are and some use cases around transit and transportation. So with that, I'll get into the slides. Thank you. So first of all, who we are. In the larger frame of things, Arcadis is one of the leading global design and consultancy firms with a presence in over 70 countries, more than 28,000 people, very focused in this transportation sector as well as many other sectors. But last year in January, a new entity was spun off from Arcadis. We call it the Digital Transformation Arm, and it's called Arcadis Gen. Dan and I are part of that group, and we're really focused around asset management enabling technologies with a digital focus on it as well. In this group, we have over 250 employees based around the world, and it's really built around the foundation of two key technologies, one being the Maximo platform for EAM, and one being the SEAMS platform for asset investment planning. So we're going to talk to you a little bit about that today. So again, from an Arcadis Gen perspective, who we are. So we really are a separate business and operating entity from Arcadis, even though there is some direct ties to that organization and a lot of synergies, as you may expect. But we're really an asset management digital technology enabler for asset-intensive industries, transportation being one of those key focuses. And our purpose is really to unlock the power of your data that you may have in the Maximo applications and other systems as well, so we can all drive towards a more sustainable, efficient, and resilient world, something we all want to do these days. And we do so by embedding our asset expertise, years and years of asset management expertise and client needs into the technology products we deliver into the marketplace, and which delivers value for all of us. As I mentioned earlier, our core product offerings are in three key areas: EAM solutions, enterprise asset and safety management, asset performance management, but we're also into the whole decision support analytics and AIP, which we're going to talk about today. And we're also looking at a whole new offering in we call Applied Insights, which is really a lightweight subscription-based kind of business-focused applications that are going to be available to the marketplace in 2021. I should mention that our advanced asset investment planning solutions have been recognized by Gartner and AMCL as some of the leading decision support and AIP tools in the marketplace as well. So what is asset investment planning? It's really about a system that enhances, your life cycle decision making related to capital renewal and maintenance and operations of an overall enterprise asset portfolio. And it's doing that by leveraging data from asset management related systems, i.e. Maximo. So if you look at the two key components of asset investment planning, it's really a lot about life cycle modeling and looking at the future of your assets and portfolio optimization. And typically you want to start building your projects and portfolio optimization based on the evidence of what's happening with your assets. So typically we prescribe that you start to build around your asset knowledge and your asset data to formulate the key interventions that should be conducted on your assets going forward into the future, and kind of packaging those into projects and portfolios. In a lot of cases, organizations are not comfortable with the state of their asset data, something very common in the marketplace. but they always do have a challenge around their capital investment planning and projects. So sometimes when it comes to AIP, the shortcut, I call it a shortcut, but the immediate need might be around optimizing your projects and capital portfolio. So hence there are typically two streams that can take place. One is a direct portfolio optimization, and in some cases, organizations are really taking the path of building those portfolios and projects from asset lifecycle evidence. Okay. So in another kind of descriptive graphic here, where does Arcadis Gen's enterprise decision analytics sit in the overall EAM landscape? So if you look at this pyramid here, this diagram, typically your asset base resides at the foundation. That might be in many different forms of a centralized repository or your GIS systems or your Maximo EAM system. But typically that information is feeding upwards towards your asset investment planning. So moving from operational decisions to tactical decisions to strategic decisions. And ideally, asset investment planning is leveraging all of this data and outcomes from the decision support modeling. It typically also culminates in moving from operational transactions and decisions at the Maximo level up through your tactical decisions and then strategic decisions for the organizations. Now, decision analytics can also be bolstered by machine learning and artificial intelligence, which our solutions do, and have really crossed the boundaries from prescriptive outcomes, which are typically at the top of this graphic, to operational or planned and predictive outcomes as well. And this is some of the stuff that we'll be talking about today as well. So just the final slide from my perspective before I hand it over to Dan. A lot of the analytic services that we provide have typically focused on the tactical and strategic level, but we've realized that, you know, the boundaries between operations, engineering, asset management, and finance are really starting to be blurred, and that a lot of this has to come together. So our analytic services really spans across all these different areas, providing analysis of asset operations to improve efficiencies, up into identifying opportunities to outperform by making the right asset decisions at the right time, and also delivering the best forecasting to deliver strategies that reduce cost, increase profit, and improve customer outcomes. Now, from a financial perspective, we want to help organizations optimize project finance forecast to make better decisions, financial decisions, linking them to asset performance and corporate finance. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Dan Scott to talk about a couple of case studies that we've been engaged with. Dan?
Thanks, Rob. Okay, so this first case study that we've got is for Bay Area Rapid Transit. So we started doing some work with BART back in 2017 using our EDA product. And the real kind of exam piece for them was to really be able to build out a model of their entire asset base. So everything on the railway from their sections of track to their stations and gate lines and ticket vending machines through to the trucks and vans that the staff use to get to site and the computer terminals that sit on their desks. So literally everything in their asset register in Maximo, they wanted to be able to take that, understand how those assets contributed to the overall risk on the network and the kind of various KPIs that they had, how that was going to change over time as those assets age and get used more, and therefore what they could do and how they could invest money into replacing assets, refurbishing assets to deliver a better asset management outcome for those items. Now, obviously, all of this was within the wider colour of money problem. So, they had, in order to, for funds to actually invest into their assets, they had access to various different funds from various different sources, and each of those came from it came with various strings attached in terms of what sorts of things they were allowed to be spent on and which things they weren't. So, for instance, some funds could only be spent on assets that would improve level access in stations. Some funds could only be spent within the city limits of San Francisco, for instance. So kind of combination of various different rules that meant that for any asset that you might want to consider, there might be 3, 4, or 5 different funding sources that you could choose to select in order to pay for that replacement. And therefore, there was a kind of opportunity cost associated with every decision that they made, which might mean that choosing to fund it from a particular source means that another asset would have to wait another year before it could be replaced. Coupled with that, BAR also needed to understand how to invest into their assets in the context of a much more significant investment program in new fleet of trains, new signalling system, and those sorts of things. So the asset model that was built from their Maximo data needed to have a concept of assets that don't exist right now, but in the future will suddenly be bought and exist on the railway, and will then start to deteriorate over time and start to kind of contribute more needs for investment in the future. And in the same token, it had to have the concept of assets that currently exist, but are going to be retired when they're replaced by these new kind of designs of assets and other bits and pieces, and therefore that needed to impact on the decisions that were made about whether to, for instance, invest much money into legacy signalling systems if you're about to rip them all out and replace them with a more modern computer-based train control system. So the model had to kind of have concepts of that entire thing, and then be able to search through that. So we talk about optimization of the various aspects of that problem to try and find the way of spending those budgets that actually delivered the best possible outcome for the network, which in this case was measured in terms of a sort of total risk score. Now, when we say optimize, we don't mean just prioritizing, kind of ranking out various options and picking the top few until we run out of money. What we use within the EDA platform is a set of optimization algorithms that are effectively more akin to search engines. They're effectively searching the mathematics of the problem to try and find for the set of constraints that we give it, which in this case is the availability of the various different types of funds at different points in time, and try and search that space to find the best possible risk outcome that it can deliver, and then return that back to us. Rob, if you want to go to the next slide, please. Okay, so yeah, so what we can see here is some of the outputs from that exercise within the system. So top left, we can kind of see that top graph is different scenarios that were run around availability of different funds and how that would be spent over time. And the bottom graph, bottom on the left, is the resulting risk that arises from that particular scenario. So here we can kind of see two significant spikes in the spend associated with the purchase of a new fleet of trains and the rollout of a new signalling system, and below that and then the remaining spend, which is then being kind of searched across the remaining entire asset base to work out, okay, around those big programs, which other assets need to be replaced to achieve good network effects and those sorts of things. And below that, we can kind of see the resulting risk of that. And one of the interesting features, it's a little bit small, but what you'll see is we see some big kind of impacts on risk associated with replacing assets, particularly getting rid of the legacy signalling system, which perhaps isn't a big surprise. But actually, what you can start to see is sometimes with relatively small increases in the cost profile that we give it, it can deliver quite a significant reduction in the risk. And that's really tied down to those colour of money rules. So where the scenario enabled certain small uplifts in funding that had fewer strings attached in terms of how that prescribing how that money was allowed to be spent, the optimization algorithm was able to actually steer that towards assets that can drive the biggest possible improvement in outcome as a result of that. And really that kind of gives a nice kind of example at kind of network level of just how these sorts of simulations of asset deterioration over time, coupled with that optimization algorithm to really search for the best possible response to that simulation, really starts to identify very different ways of investing into the assets to drive very, very different outcomes from data out of Maximo. Rob, if we can go to the next slide, please. So the next case study I just want to talk about is for London Underground. So here, where on BART we were talking about a complete cross-network optimization, where we're looking at every type of asset and they're all deteriorating in different ways at different speeds. Here this is a very deep slice around a very particular asset area. So in this case, the track. So going down not just to segments of track, when should I replace that segment of track and when shouldn't I, but actually a really deep slice into the individual components that make up that section of track. So down to the kind of fixings and the individual rails and the ties and the ballast and those sorts of things, as well as the drainage and switches and crossings. So really down at a component level across the entire network, what should we, how should we invest, and what sort of work should we do? So should we undertake wholesale renewal of a section of track between point A and point B, or should we just replace certain components as part of a kind of packaged project within that area, or should we just go in and do some heavy maintenance and that sort of thing? So generally, kind of anywhere between kind of 9 and 15 kind of options that we were offering up to that optimization algorithm to kind of search through and recommend the best possible outcome. Within that system, it was a usage-based system, so it simulated the deterioration of the assets based on things such as the annual kind of traffic of trains through each kind of segment of the railway, the curvature and environment and kind of configuration of the track and design of the track in each section. So quite a granular, deep understanding of exactly how each component would respond to different levels of loading and different environments, and therefore how that would change the decision. So if the rails are deteriorating much faster than the ties, does that mean that you're more likely to just go in and want to do a rail replacement, or an aggressive rail grinding regime, for instance, as opposed to doing a wholesale dig out of the track and replacement? So the system could kind of search through all of those sorts of things. It also had to simulate the impact on the actual passenger service. So within that model was a representation of a detailed simulation of how passengers actually interact with the London Underground network. So based on gate line data of how many people come in and out of each station through the day for every 15 minutes of the day, coupled with loadway data, so actually how heavy are the trains as they travel between different stations, to build up a complete map of exactly how people move across the London Underground network. And therefore, as we start to predict that certain conditions of certain components might give rise to the potential for service affecting failures, how many people would be affected by that service affecting failure, and for how long, and therefore we can kind of start to give the optimization algorithm an idea of the relative criticality of different parts of the network and how much pain is incurred if those sections of the network start to fail. And what that allowed us to do is then effectively articulate to the optimizer that there are different strategies that it might want to choose from, such as in the center of the network where passenger numbers are very, very high, the cost of a disruption is very, very high because it kind of flows out. One strategy, a more kind of intensive strategy of replacement to avoid failures might be a good thing to explore, as opposed to at the extremities of the network where actually maybe more of a kind of patch repair and keep it going kind of strategy might be a better mix, and explore what happens under various different levels of constraints around funding, resource availability, access availability, and all these sorts of things across the network to really search through all the different possible strategies and come up with the best plan. Next slide, please, Rob. And the outcome of that, is quite noticeable. So again, that piece of work started with London Underground in 2010. And has kind of really reinforced and embedded within the decision making for their track program to really kind of drive which sections of track were going to be replaced, what the scope of that replacement would actually look like, and what we can see on the graph here. So the grey bars effectively represent the volume of the asset on the network that was considered by the system to be beyond life expired, if that makes sense. And you can kind of see how it's working its way through, and it's based on all the rule sets and all of the simulations, all the data that it's consumed from Maximo and other sources, how it's kind of understood the condition of the asset, and it's kind of identifying those to be removed. the red line represents that kind of passenger disruption. So these are actual figures as opposed to simulated. But you can kind of see that. So this is looking at disruption to passengers on the network associated with track assets. So every time a track asset fails in a way that, such as a temporary speed restriction or something like that is required, this is a quantification of the total disruption caused by that event. And what we can see is that over the period of time, a very, very significant 61% reduction in disruption to passengers across the network due to the track assets. Similarly, what you see there is the green line, which is the TOTEX cost. So the system had a complete context that it learnt from the historical data in Maximo and other sources about the relationship between the condition of the asset and how much reactive and planned maintenance would need to be undertaken. So planned maintenance is obviously fairly easy to forecast. Reactive maintenance was trained using machine learning algorithms based on historical events to kind of relate the condition of the asset to the chances that it's going to either fail in inspection or fail in service, and therefore require a team to go on site and repair that, and the associated time and materials that's associated with that repair. And what you can see there, so therefore, that green line represents the TOTEX cost, the combined CapEx and OpEx cost of ownership of the asset. So you can see that, with a 61% reduction in failure and delays, actually there's also a slight drop over time in the TOTEX cost of ownership of those assets. So even that improvement was being delivered, even though we're actually spending less on those assets. And what's not shown on the graph is actually between 2010 and 2017. The service usage of the network was actually increased by about 13%. So by 2017, which is the end of that graph, you've got track assets that are cheaper to own, considerably more reliable, and are carrying 13% more revenue services than they were at the beginning. So that's kind of good example of just how far you can go down this route with really kind of harvesting the quality data that's in systems like Maximo and everything else, building out those models to kind of really give a really rich view of what does the future look like for these assets and how's that going to impact on my business KPIs and that sort of thing, and then offering that up to those optimization algorithms to really search through that and go, what is the best I can do in response to this? How is the best way I can deploy my resources and budget to really give me the best outcome for all of this? Rob, shall I hand back to you just to kind of close us out? We're at the time.
I'm just going to thank you, Dan, and I know that we have a couple of minutes in that, so I just wanted to wrap up and see if there's any questions, but more importantly as well, I want to mention that, again, ZPro is one of our strategic partners in North America, and I should mention this key point is that we are working collaboratively right now as we speak to actually build the integration points between Maximo and EDA. It's something that, typically on a project, these are custom integration points, but we want to develop something in fairly short order that is basically out of the box integration so that organizations have access to an end-to-end offering for the management of their key assets. So with that, I throw it back to Scott to see if there's any questions.
Very good. Thank you, Rob. Thank you, Dan. Any questions we have out there? And again, if you have some questions, throw those onto chat, please. We're not going to have the mics open because we've got so many folks attending this particular webinar.
Okay, and to that point, we do have the contact information on the slide, and Bob Keeley, the Director of Business Development, is also there from a ZPro perspective.
Yep, very good. Well, thank you very much, Dan, Rob. So as mentioned earlier at the beginning of the webinar, if you do have additional questions, follow-up, you'd like to be in contact with us to take a little deeper dive into this particular solution, leave your phone number in the chat window and we will touch bases with you folks.
Thanks,
so
Scott.
now moving, you betcha. Thank you guys. Great presentation. So moving on, we do have a few sponsor spotlights. Which helps, of course, pay the bills for these webinars. So we've got a short sponsor spotlight for ZPro Solutions. So I'll turn it over to Bob Keeley. Bob?
Thank you, Scott. And can you see my screen?
We can.
Okay, great. And I also want to provide my thanks to Dan and Rob and all of today's speakers. We've got a great agenda for this user group, and I appreciate all of the speakers taking their time today to share this information with the Transportation Mug. My name is Bob Keeley, and I'm the Director of Business Development and Operations for ZPro Solutions. ZPro is proud to be the host of today's Mug event and to have a few minutes for this vendor spotlight. As we move away from the crazy year that was 2020, ZPro continues to grow as a premier IBM business partner and a full service provider of asset management and data management solutions. Even though we are growing, we still retain our SBE status, small business status, as well as MBE and DBE certifications in many states, municipalities, and agencies across North America. We are extremely proud of our leadership team and consultants that have the diverse skill sets to cover many technologies with and beyond Maximo, such as IoT, GIS, data governance, and as you just saw with the EDA solution, decision support, as well as various integration and reporting solutions. The most recent member to join our team this last December was Brian Furness. He comes to us with 18 years of professional asset management experience with one of the largest transit agencies, New York MTA, working with New York Transit. We welcome Brian as we continue to expand on our strategic focus of the transportation and public sectors. For ZPro, our clients are our lifeblood. We welcome long-term relationships. Quite frankly, you come first. We work with you to discover your needs, guide you through unlocking technology, and then lead you through the implementation of the solutions. Whether you are looking to move to the cloud or wish to host your own solutions, our team will ensure that you have reliable and sustainable solutions that map to your strategic goals. As we look at working with you, we always go with those three major tenets of not only focus on engineering reliability and unlocking innovative solutions, but the three primary tenets of discover, innovate, and implement. Again, as everybody on this call knows, with ZPro being the host of this Transportation Mug event, we are an IBM Maximo partner, a silver business partner. We are very proud of the fact that we're also a Maximo licensed reseller, certified with our staff certified with many different aspects of Maximo deployment, and of course, as I've stated before, we're stretching beyond the scope of just Maximo by supporting strategically our clients, whether it be to help them with procurement policies, to help them with the rationalization of their data, the collection of their data, the structure of their data, as well as setup of asset management offices. We've done many of those type of projects beyond the scope of Maximo with our existing client base. Of course, our main focus is on transportation, and that is with both Maximo and Arcadis Gen EDA. We obviously support Maximo for transportation, linear as well as spatial, around also the core functions of Maximo itself. I should also have added to this slide Maximo mobile capabilities, because we do support those as well, and we're very happy to have brought Arcadis Gen into our solution set amongst the various partners that we work with for enterprise data analytics, because now we do feel that we're amply able to support the full life cycle of your organization, not just the solutions that you're looking for, all the way from the asset manager, those of you who actually own the assets, responsible for maintenance, but all the way through to the asset planners by including asset investment planning on top of the Maximo solution set that covers the full asset life cycle. I should point out for ZPro Solutions, we don't only support transportation, we do have vast experience with a number of asset-intensive clients across many highly regulated industries. We do support facilities management, utilities, life sciences, oil and gas, as well as manufacturing on top of transportation. But our key focus has been, as we continue to grow, transit and public sector. And with that, I just wanted to end by saying that we're very proud of our capability to support our communities. And we're proud to be the host of this Maximo User Group event, as well as others. Scott has been doing an excellent job to administer, to grow, to plan these events, and he's still looking to support further groups and revitalize other groups. We welcome you to join, if you are fit within the Pacific region, to join the PACMUG meeting later this month on the 27th. We also work directly with IBM to do monthly roundtable events. This particular month's event is on the 21st, and we'll be discussing Maximo Scheduler as a primary topic. ZPro is committed to supporting communities, supporting our user groups, and we will be continuing to do so, hopefully, as Scott put it, face-to-face at some point in 2021. So with that, Scott, I just wanted to hand it back to you so we can move on to the next speaker.
Thank you so much, Bob. Yes, hopefully, as things return to normal, we will have one meeting a year at a particular facility, and then we also discussed about having that as a live event as well. So you can either join in person and mingle with your peers, or you can also log on and enjoy the meeting as well. It'll be a little bit longer meeting, but we're going to keep in the spirit of trying to keep those live events moving forward again. So let's move on with our next presentation. We've got IBM presentation coming to you next. Joe Saunders, Ed Jones, Civil Infrastructure for IBM. So with that, I'll turn that over to you, Joe.
Okay, great. And I hope you can see my slides and hear my voice.
Yes, we can. Yep, you're all good to go.
Excellent. So thanks everybody for taking some time to listen to us today. What I wanted to talk to you about is our Maximo for Civil Infrastructure solution, which is the newest industry solution on the Maximo Application Suite solution on Maximo EAM as well. And so we'll get right into this. I will talk a little bit about some of the future capability that we're doing. So I'm sure you've seen this slide before. Don't take any buying decisions based on future capability that we talk about. So first of all, why are we doing this? So we started this solution. We started thinking about this actually a couple of years ago. We did our first release at the beginning of last year. And we were really motivated by the fact that throughout the world, there is a lot of critical infrastructure, and a lot of that critical infrastructure, roads, bridges, rails, and tunnels, are both expensive to manage, and also much of it is beyond its useful life cycle. So unfortunately, we've seen that there have been some failures around the world. We believe that we can leverage the Maximo technology to help these structures be both less risky, to be less expensive to maintain, and to have a higher availability. And that's our goal with the product, is to help our customers leverage our technology to do that. As I said, and I'm sure I'm preaching to the choir here, we know there's quite a few structures out in the world that are beyond their useful life cycle. We also know that we're spending just a ton of money to manage these structures. Even just in inspections across the world, we spend $50 billion, 2 billion man hours just inspecting bridges. And that doesn't get into roads and rail or tunnels that we're also focusing on. Surprisingly, we're still relying on inconsistent tools. Not everybody's using Maximo in the space, or even any other EAM solution. We have customers that don't have a consistent tool across all their assets. We're also still have a whole lot of information being passed back and forth in paper-based or PDF reports. So inspections are executed A report is created. That report is passed over, explaining all the things that were found. And that's not a great process for being able to leverage that data in intelligent learning systems going forward. So we want to improve that process. There's still a lot of manual inspections. There will be manual inspections, for the foreseeable future, because of course these are legislated and regulated industries. But there are opportunities to provide a better and more real-time picture of the condition of these assets through automation and through sensors, and we want to help support that with our product. And then, of course, the other motivation, as I touched on earlier, is there have been failures, and unfortunately, some of those failures are catastrophic, with loss of life and significantly impacting. But even small failures of critical infrastructure like this can have a huge impact. It can stop the trains from running, or the roads cause the roads to be closed. They can create financial impact for communities and for industries as well. And so obviously, if we can help to better manage these structures and reduce the risk of critical failure like this, then we can both improve safety and maintain better health of the structure, and we can improve the financial costs. Clearly there's a huge cost when the failure occurs, but also the economy around these structures as they are critical to infrastructure. So that brings us to, what do we want to do and how do we want to accomplish this? And one of the key aspects of the Maximo civil infrastructure solution is that we're not just focused on the enterprise asset management part of the solution. This is clearly a key part of our solution. It is absolutely critical to provide a solid foundation of understanding the assets, and understanding their work associated with them, managing that work, managing contractors and inventory, etc. That is something that, of course, Maximo does, Maximo EM does and does well, and has done for years. But we believe that the monitoring of the entire, or the management of the entire asset requires more than just that enterprise asset management capability, that we also need to bring in functions like attaching to the IoT, bringing in sensors so that we can get a real-time understanding of what's going on with the solution. So we want to build a solid base in the understanding of the assets, and then we want to start to augment that as we journey forward from a scheduled maintenance perspective to a predictive and then prescriptive maintenance perspective. In order to do that, we have to have a better understanding of the condition of the asset. In order to do that, we need to start to monitor things. We need to start to do a more complete job of collecting issues on the asset. And we do that through manual inspections, but we also can enable a automated inspection capability with visual inspection technology. And as I'm sure you may have heard, visual inspections is now part of the Maximo portfolio. So we do have technology here for doing analytics of inspections, or analytics of images of these structures. But one of the things that we know is that in order for anything like visual inspection to be successful, we have to be very good about collecting those images. And just having a random organization fly a drone around the structure and take a bunch of pictures is not always sufficient to get the quality that we need in order to detect these problems, because in the civil infrastructure space, we're looking at very large assets, particularly on bridges, where the visual inspection is one of the key functions there. We may be monitoring a pillar that's 100 feet tall, and we're looking for a crack on that pillar that's a fraction of an inch wide. And so we have to have very high resolution pictures. We have to have specific activities or analytics pipelines in order to efficiently analyze those pictures and find those very small cracks. And we have to have the ability to put a drone or other device in the same position month after month, so we can take the same picture from a prescribed distance away from the asset, so that we get consistency, quality, and predictability out of those pictures, that we can do analytics over and over again and track the evolution of cracks and other defects as they develop. So we've done, or will do, continue to do specific development around visual inspections to civil infrastructure. And that leads into understanding in real time the condition of the assets. This, of course, builds up to understanding the health of the asset, so we can start to do condition-based monitoring to a greater degree. We can understand the overall condition as a function of the work that's being done on the asset, of the sensors that are driving into that asset, of the defects that we've detected both through automation and through manual inspections, and even from third or outside influences like weather and traffic that's riding over the roads, rails, bridges, or tunnels. Those things all contribute to an understanding of the overall condition of the asset, and that allows us to prioritize the work that we're doing when we actually start to address the issues that we've found. And then that, of course, leads us to the ultimate goal here, which is to begin to be more predictive and then prescriptive about the remedies that we put into the solution. So having a good, solid understanding of the condition of the asset and combining that with the complete understanding of the work that was done on the asset that we have in the managed component, we're able to build up a understanding or an algorithm that allows us to predict failures as they're occurring in the future. And that, of course, is when we achieve really strong return on investment, because if we can keep some of the components of civil infrastructure in place, there's very high cost of repairing components of a bridge or replacing a bridge or a tunnel, or even repairing or replacing components on roads or rail. And if we can keep those components in place for a few more years, or if we can predict the failure that's going to occur and address it during a period of low traffic, we significantly reduce the impact to availability, and we increase the or reduce the cost of managing or maintaining those assets. So this is our journey, and you may have seen this with other industry solutions or presentations from IBM, because we're all following a similar journey. But I'm going to talk to you a little bit about specifically what we plan to do and what we have done within the civil infrastructure solution. And I didn't mention mobile yet. Mobile is ubiquitous throughout this process. So we are significantly enhancing our mobile capability with releases coming out very soon around this. We want to get to a very prescriptive process where we're directing technicians to next best actions within this function, and we're leveraging mobile throughout the process and manage and monitor and health. We'll leverage it to collect the images that will go into the visual inspection. So mobile sort of suffuses everywhere. But one of the key things that we'll focus on within mobile is this ability to collect information from previous repair sessions and make that available to technicians in future repair sessions through the assist capability. And that's one of the really interesting functions that we will take advantage of. So I'm going to assume that most of you, excuse me, I think, all right, guys, I clicked on something and lost my share there. So I'm assuming most of you have probably heard about the Maximo application suite by now. This is our strategy going forward across Maximo. Of course, I assume most of the users here are probably deeply engaged in the EAM or the managed part of the solution. But we believe that it's necessary to have a full set of capabilities across multiple areas. This is work we've been doing traditionally in the APM part of our portfolio. Scheduler, of course, and visual inspections I talked about, and then functionality that we traditionally had in our IoT capability has all been brought under the umbrella of the Maximo application suite. And this will provide us with a single license that gives you access to all of this capability, which is going to make it significantly easier to implement and drive projects that leverage things like sensors and to get into the health and predict capabilities without changing or going into a whole new procurement process every time you want to use another capability within the Maximo application suite. We're also building this, of course, on Red Hat OpenShift. This will make it easier to deploy and creates flexibility on where you deploy it, either in an IBM cloud or in another cloud or on your premise. Wherever you deploy it, it all looks the same, and it makes it easy to shift between those different deployment choices. So the installation will be faster, and the licensing is going to make it easier to leverage all this capability. And if we look at, industry solutions that are out there today, kind of this is the model that most of them look like today. They're feeding mainly into manage. It's not exactly accurate for ENU, which is doing more work within health. But this is not the model we want to see in the future. This is where we're driving to and leveraging Maximo for civil infrastructure as a sort of a leader in this space. So we will, of course, continue to focus on enhancing and making it easier to use and manage functionality with industry-specific assets, content, and development within Manage. But we're also going to drive into the rest of the portfolio. So we'll create blueprints and monitor for the sensors that make sense on roads, bridges, rails, and tunnel. We're creating unique algorithms in visual inspection. We'll do scheduling of road closures and rail possessions in unique ways within the scheduler. We'll input our own assets into Assist. We're going to do a lot of work around health to be able to better visualize the condition of the assets, feed into Predict, and then look for the unique aspects of safety around road closures and rail possessions, as well as going into tunnels and down into bridges where there are going to be capabilities we can use there. So one of the key messages here is that we are building an industry solution for the Maximo application suite. We're not building this for the EAM solution or the managed solution. We're building it across the portfolio, and we hope to bring the value that is going to drive work and improve the ability to leverage all of the capability in the portfolio. So to go into a little bit of detail on that, if we look at Manage, of course, as I said, Manage, which is, I hope everybody understands the renaming of the Enterprise Asset Management or the traditional Maximo Asset Management product. This is what we'll call it going forward. And in there, this is, as I mentioned, absolutely critical to what we're doing going forward. It's the base asset repository that's going to allow us to understand what's going on with the assets, what work needs to be accomplished, and manage that work and help plan it. So some of the unique challenges here within civil infrastructure, first of all, we tend to manage a lot of linear assets. So we're increasing our investment in the linear add-on. We're looking at some of the challenges there, making sure that we're going to bring that user interface along into the modernized Maximo UI. We are looking at ways to reduce the cost of onboarding complex assets by providing out-of-the-box hierarchies for bridges, roads, rails, and tunnels, as well as improving some of the tools for importing and exporting assets in-house to IBM. So we know we need to have some control over how we import and export assets, because things like highway bridges, each one is unique and different, but they all have similar structures. We can create a hierarchy that generally represents a type of bridge or a type of tunnel. But then we need to be able to tweak that hierarchy for each specific instance of that. And that requires a lot of ability to move in a very easy way things in and out of the system. And so we're improving on that. We're also going to focus on the spatial capability as we go forward. But one of the things that we've focused on already is around how we collect and manage defects. And the reason for that is that we know that at least for some of the assets that we're going to manage within civil infrastructure, we have a situation where we're going to track some problems for a long time. If there's a crack on a pillar and that crack is small and not expanding, it may not be an issue. But we do want to watch it, because in 6 months, if it does expand, or if 3 other cracks develop right next to it, then suddenly that becomes an issue that I need to address. And so when we do an inspection and we find that crack, it doesn't make sense just to spawn a work order to follow up on that. It's not a great way to track that. So we've enhanced the defect capability that already existed out of the HSE component, and we're leveraging that to allow tracking of these long-term problems that we need to watch the evolution over time, but not necessarily fix right away. And this will drive into the condition of the asset. It's going to feed into our health model. It will also, of course, spawn work once that defect expands, or if that defect expands to the point where it is critical. And it will be able to drive some of the reporting that we know we need to do on the conditions of the assets. So we've done a lot of work around defects. And another key part of this is that one of the areas of focus that we have is on how we locate those defects. Because when we're talking about an asset like a beam or a pillar or a deck, just saying there is a defect on the beam is not sufficient. We need to know where that defect is on the beam in a more precise level than just down to the asset. And so we've introduced some additional capability within the BIM plugin to be able to mark up defects in a particular place so that we can understand their precise location, so that bridge engineers, when they go to address problems, can understand the context of that problem, can see that that crack is in the middle of the beam and there's 3 other parallel cracks next to it. That means the beam's flexing. If the crack is horizontal and it's in the approximate location where I know the rebar is, well, then my rebar is corroding. So understanding the location of these defects precisely is important. This is a thing that in a lot of cases right now is drawn on a hand-drawn diagram, is not available within the Maximo system directly, and therefore is difficult for somebody addressing the problem to understand and actually use as a driver to things like health and prediction. Of course, monitor is key. We want to improve the ability to bring in sensors, and we have some unique problems here too as well. And what's interesting is if we look at bridges and tunnels, the problems are kind of divergent. So on bridges, the problem is that bridges move all the time. So when the sun hits it in the morning, a bridge can get expanded on one side and then contract on the other side when it gets cold. Of course, wind and traffic cause the bridge to move. So it's a living organism that's moving around all the time. And if I pop a movement sensor on a beam or on a pillar, I need to be able to find the anomalous movement. I need to be able to leverage the analytics capability within Monitor to actually look for anomalies and to compare temperature changes with sensor movement to tease out that anomalous movement and use that to actually find the problems that drive my focus and that will eventually result in work. When I look at tunnels, I have the opposite problem. They barely move. But if they move a little bit, that's a huge problem. And so I need to have algorithms there that allow me to understand the really minute movements that occur and filter those out of the noise that the sensors naturally produce as humidity and temperature change and just as the sensor exists. And so this is where we're leveraging some of the capability in Monitor. We will do so more as we go forward into the future. So some of this is things that we plan to do over the next year or two. But we're going to keep this capability here or leverage this capability in Monitor to be able to understand that sensor data better. Of course, once we do that, we can get real-time insight to what's going on in the structures. That's going to feed into our health, and health is central to the solution. We want to understand the condition of the assets and use that as the driver for prioritizing work and inspections on the assets. And so some of the unique problems here, one, we're managing complex structures like bridges and tunnels. We need to be able to aggregate the health across those structures. And then we need to be able to understand that health in a visualization that is unique to that structure. So we will be doing more work here. We're just starting to scratch the surface on what we need to do in health, but we are going to continue to expand in this space. And of course, all the health capability is available within the solution that exists today, but we're going to continue to improve that with industry-specific visualization and sample and template health dashboards that show you how to manage things like bridge. The other area that we're particularly interested in here and will be improving over time is understanding the health of linear assets. So this is an area where we can do better, and we shall. So looking at the health of roads and rails and exposing that and understanding how that is impacted by not only the direct asset, but also the supporting equipment around that within the corridor. That's all part of the work that we have to do around health. And health drives us into prediction. Once we understand the health of the asset, we can combine that with understanding the work that was done on the asset, begin to build the understanding of what is driving the failures, so that we can predict that in the future. And this requires that we start to build up this corpus of defects and connect the sensors together so that we can begin to learn over time the things that are driving these failures, and then predict them and raise those to the level that we can do work against them before they happen, and reduce the impacts to traffic and reduce the impacts to, or reduce the cost of doing this work. The other aspect of predict is to reduce unnecessary work, right? So we want to understand the maintenance we're doing, compare that to the failures that are actually occurring, and make sure that we aren't over maintaining the assets and wasting money that way. And I touched on visual inspections already. I've talked a bit about this. This is another core capability because we understand the amount of both cost as well as risk that goes into inspecting these structures. So we want to be able to reduce the cost of inspecting very large structures. We want to do that through automation of the models that or automation of the analytics of the images. But we're also bringing out unique capability around directing the drone flights. We aren't getting into the business of flying drones, just to be very clear, because that question gets asked. But we are creating software that's going to help those that fly the drones fly them consistently and get the pictures that are necessary for us to do the visual analytics. Because again, when we're looking for millimeter wide cracks on a 100-meter tall pillar, the precision of the flight and the resolution of the picture and the consistency of distance from the structure all become very critical to us. And we believe that manual flights aren't going to be sufficient to collect that level of imagery. We're going to have directed flights, and we want to be able to direct those flights leveraging information out of the asset repository. So when we understand what the assets are, we can understand the shape of those assets. We can direct the flights based on those assets, and then the information that we get back is already tied into the managed solution. We can directly attach that to the assets and begin to make it actionable. So, there's lots of solutions out there that can fly a drone. There's lots of solutions out there that can analyze an image and come back with defects. The real critical part and difficult problem to solve is being able to get that done consistently, being able to associate those defects with an asset and place them precisely on that asset, and then being able to do that month after month so that you can watch the evolution of that asset. Safety is obviously critical. We know that that's an issue with workers working close to roads and rail, and also with workers going into confined spaces like bridges and tunnels. And there's particular planning you need to do around this, as well as unique aspects to how we use the safety component, like the fact that our areas we want to secure are moving all the time. You know, we're not sitting inside of a factory here. We're alongside a road with a closure that's going to last for a week and then move on to the next section. So we will, in the future, as we start to more closely work with the safety product, look at ways that we address some of those unique aspects. And then mobile, as I mentioned earlier, and assist are critical. We've got people out there on bridges and tunnels and in roads and rails. We need to fix things quickly, and we need to fix them right the first time so that we reduce the impacts on the solution. So I know I'm running short on time here. Just real quick, an overview of where we've been. So we did our first release of this product earlier this year. We did an update in September where we added the defects and the BIM capability. We plan another release in January where we're adding some capability around rail possession planning, and then in April we will become natively part of the Maximo application suite. One of the key things to note here, as I put on these slides, is that we are selling this solution pretty exclusively through the Maximo application suite as the way we want customers to get this, because even though our current offering is mainly focused on EAM, that's just the beginning of our journey, and we are going to leverage the capability across the Maximo application suite as we go forward. So going quickly through, the first solution was mainly just a bundling. The second solution, we started to introduce more capability. So we do have the ability to mark up defects on our 3D views. We've added additional defect management capability, extending what was there already. And then we're adding in some ability to improve the loading and export of assets. Quick slide on our defect capability, and then this sort of points to the future of where we're going with our visual analytics. The ability to detect defects and precisely place them on the assets is really critical to us. And one of the things that I want to make a point here is that we're not doing this in the abstract. So these images, for instance, come from a drone flight that we've done around our anchor customer's bridge. It's a 14-kilometer bridge in the middle of a bay. It's very big. It has winds flowing around it. We have to fly the drone underneath where we lose GPS signal. And we're solving a lot of these very hard problems in this. You know, it's easy enough to fly a drone around a static building without too much wind. It's really challenging to fly it underneath a bridge and lose your GPS and still have a heavy wind and keep that drone a prescribed distance away from the asset as you're taking a set of pictures. And so we're not trying to solve the easy problems. We're solving the really hard problems of automated inspections here, and we'll productize that as we go forward. We're focusing on 6 key defects around concrete. So obviously cracks, rust, rebar, corrosion, spalling, and then active moisture and algae was interesting to our customer because their bridge is in a bay. And these are, as I mentioned, hard problems. We're leveraging actually 2 different IBM research teams to solve some of the really difficult problems that we need to solve here, and then translating that directly into our industry solution as we move forward. And our key customer here, one of our key customers is Sun and Belt. I mentioned their bridge in Denmark, which is one of the largest bridges in the world. So they're leveraging the solution and also actively inputting information into this. We're collecting best practices from Sun and Belt and moving those into the solution. They are our industry partner in this development. We're also working with Autostrada per Italia in Italy. And the interesting thing here is that these 2 customers, as our first 2 anchor customers on the solution, provide a huge breadth of difference. So Sun and Belt is very much about managing newer, large assets. Autostrada per Italia has tens of thousands of smaller bridges across a large highway network. And so we are out of the gate getting both sides of the equation, and that's helping to round out the solution and make sure that we're getting input from our stakeholders in a way that's going to be useful to multiple customers. Both of these customers have rail components, and we're also working with a third customer specifically on rail. So rail is 100% important to us as well. And so that takes us to the end. We have ways to get more information here, as well as my contact information and my peers' contact information here in the offering management team. You probably already know Ed Jones. I know he's presented in this group before. He is absolutely critical to developing the architecture for the solution. So he's another contact point, even though he's not called out on the slide here. So thank you, everybody, for your time. I don't know if we have any questions that have come up in the chat.
Yeah, thanks so
that might be
much.
worth answering.
Thanks, Joe. We do have a couple questions out there, and I know one of them was, what does the one-click download represent for the digital twin?
Okay, yeah, I can talk about that. So I didn't really go into the digital twin, and part of what we're doing is we recognize that the ultimately creating these models that represent the digital twins of structures is going to be really important for us. It also applies to mechanical components and vehicles and so forth. And so we've created a digital twin exchange, and that's a marketplace for our partners and customers to publish twins that they've created. And, you know, digital twins are very, very broad notion. So it may be, you know, anything from a full true digital twin that I could, you know, predict the impact of making changes to, all the way down to, you know, a bill of materials for a truck, right? So there's a lot of variability in what a digital twin is. But we've created this digital twin exchange where we can start to publish those things. We believe that's very critical to our digital twin strategy going forward, because we're never going to be able to create twins for everything that's out there ourselves. We need input from our customers and from our business partners on that, and from manufacturers as well. And once those are created, the one-click download is about connecting directly from that digital twin exchange back into the Maximo application suite. So if I have a bill of materials, I click on that, and it can become the bill of materials or an asset hierarchy in Maximo Manage. So that's what that's about. Honestly, I'm not the expert on where we're at with that. I know we've done some of that work. I know we have a little bit more to do around that, but that's the intent, is that we be able to publish these models and then move them into our solution wherever they belong. So it might populate some capability in Manage, might populate a health dashboard in Health. And, you know, our vision from a civil infrastructure standpoint, and we're working with partners and customers to get here, is that we might have a customer that creates a set of functionality, job plans, PMs, asset hierarchies, as well as 3D models for a type of bridge. Let's say it's a suspension bridge. And even though their suspension bridge is going to be different than every other suspension bridge in the world, it has common components, right? Every bridge is going to have a pillar. It's going to have a main cable. It's going to have hangers. Those are going to attach to a deck. There's going to be a hanger attachments and cable to the cable, and there's going to be hanger attachments to the deck, etc. And so that asset hierarchy can provide the starting off point for the next customer who has a suspension bridge to manage. And we're pulling some of that capability directly into the product, but we're also going to direct some of that capability to Digital Twin Exchange, where both our customers, our partners, can either monetize that capability through charging for it through the Digital Twin Exchange, or we really hope what we foster there is more of an ecosystem where sharing that model allows somebody else to improve upon it, and then that improvement is pulled back into the original publisher So they gain advantage from an ecosystem of people all working together on a model of a bridge or a tunnel or road or rail, in that we foster that exchange through the digital twin exchange. And then the one-click download is just how we get that back into the product so it becomes actionable.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Joe. Okay, another great solution by IBM as far as civil infrastructure for Maximo. If you guys have any follow-up questions, be sure to go ahead and leave information in the chat window, and we will connect you. I know the information is on Joe's slide as well. So with that, again, it's time to pay a few bills here. Our next sponsor spotlight will be with KDIT Solutions and chat a little bit about what their organization provides. With that, Pranjal Duda, you are on stage.
Thank you, Scott. Good morning, everyone. Good evening or good afternoon, wherever you are. Okay, let me share my screen.
Perfect.
I probably need to.
Then right after our spotlight, we are going to have a presentation with the United States Antarctic Program, supporting the world's largest or the longest supply chain. Will be right after the spotlight. So, Pranjal, it's all yours.
Okay, let me share my content. Okay. Can you guys see it?
Coming up, waiting.
Do you see it?
Yet.
All good?
No, still waiting.
Oh.
One of these bandwidth issues, probably.
Maybe I will stop the video feed on my side at least. Stop sharing. Share the screen one.
There it is.
Okay. 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 I got only 5 minutes. I'll zoom through it. We are based out of Calgary and in US, Wyoming, and we basically do the process validations and testing and performance testing and tuning for Maximo, and obviously other system as well. But Maximo is which we have been doing for a long time. So this is what we do: end-to-end process validation. We do intelligent test automation, workflow-based automation for Maximo, and integrated. Obviously, Maximo is integrated with SAP, Oracle systems, or any other financial systems as well. So it's end-to-end, and a performance testing of the system. Okay. So we, as is evident, we make robots for testing, and it's a cloud-based thing, and you can run these bots anytime on your side. So it will validate much faster. And obviously, the next one is performance testing. It's a different objective, and this is one of the quick customer success story, and they saved 70% of their time. They had like 150 scenarios end to end. Always they run during their regular annual upgrade, and everything. Most of them have been automated, so they get quick feedback, and then we also create data with that, and this is what they are getting year over year. All the emergency break fix and support incidents have reduced 81% from their metrics. So for Maximo system. And I'm just zooming through fast, and this is the statement we just received recently. So this is their language, that their system stability is increasing. They got thumbs up on that, and decreasing the number of service desk ticket, and the most important, and the number of projects delivery has increased because of that. Now I will just go through a quick 1 minute thing where I will show you what a bot looks like. And before that, I'm just showing a typical workflow based and end-to-end process, what it looks like. Obviously, it starts with a create. Let's say it starts with a create work order, PR, PO. Just let me go through the PRPO, then all things go to invoicing. It may be, I mean, this is just a sample thing. It may be other systems. It's not necessarily Maximo systems. So those things, typically when you validate as a large the workflow, it takes 1 or 1.5 hours. And then when we run as in our bot, it just probably takes 7 to 12 minutes, depending on if you have to wait for a cron job to run for every 2 minutes to generate PR or other system to respond. So we can also go to other system and validate there. So everything. So it's basically end to end. So it's quite a time reduction in the validation of the workflow. And this is exactly the video recording of a bot which is running, and this is a rotating item end to end. It logs in an item control. I'm not going to run the whole thing, but this process takes a long time manually, and I'll just fast forward this one. So you can see everything is automated. All these things you see it here, it's the bot is doing based on your data. Data can be changed all the time. You are running this every time there is a deployment or there's a big upgrade is going on. So basically, the bottom line is that all these things are validating faster than a manual thing. And then if there is any error, anything is there, you get to know quickly. That's the biggest benefit you get. And this bot will also take screenshot in case of all the success things. When you want to see the PO to be approved, it takes screenshot at that moment. If it is sometimes it fails because of your application issues, it will take a screenshot as well there, so you can go back and check all those validation. So again, we have been doing for a long time, more than a lot of scenarios we have been doing all the time. So I think that's in a nutshell. That's where we have a very sweet spot of strength. We help our clients to get these projects delivered faster, so that you have a peace of mind, and you can go ahead with your project delivery or maintenance faster and reliably. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Pranjal. Looks like a great solution KDIT provides. So again, contact information is here. In the chat window, again, you can put contact information. We can hook you up with KDIT as well with their solution. So next presentation coming up is going to be Patty Douglas and Nancy Farrell on the U.S. Antarctic Program, which is going to be talking about supporting the world's longest supply chain. So I will turn it over to you, Patty.
Thanks. Let me get set up here so I can.
Sure.
So I can show my my screen. Hang on just a second. Can you see my screen okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay. At the end of the presentation, if we have time, I have a really quick flight deck time lapse, which is at South Pole, which is a lot of fun to watch.
Okay.
And
I see your
that's my
desktop.
hometown, South Pole Station. I was a logistics manager there for 13 years while we built a new station, and no longer a new station. And I am currently the Maximo overall system manager, and Nancy is the system manager in Maximo for the work order side of the house. We have another system manager who isn't with us today who looks at the inventory and cargo movement side of the house. That's a little bit about us. So in order to really understand the supply chain and the logistics of what we do, you need to understand kind of the place and where it happens. It's really important to understand that because the place and the challenges of the place drive our technical decisions and our technical architecture as long as, in addition to our capabilities. So so what I'm going to do is first give you a feel for the place. And this is dawn at South Pole Station. Nice long open view. So Antarctica is a very large continent. It's roughly the size of and when I was managing South Pole, we had 2 inches of powder and 2 miles of base. So when you're looking at the continent, 90% of the Earth's ice is in Antarctica, 70% of the world's fresh water, and the ice thickness is around 2 miles. If you were to look under the ice, strip that all away, this is what the continent would look like. And this is a NASA model, and they've used ground penetrating radar for most of this. So it's a pretty good feel for what it would look like. So basically, the deal with Antarctica is it is the highest, driest, windiest, coldest, emptiest continent on Earth. Truly can be a challenge to work in. This is at one of the field camps. The other thing about Antarctica is that it only has 2 seasons, summer, winter. This is a summer shot at one of the field camps. You can see one of our A-stars that helps support the field camps. It has one long day. I think that's at Pole. And it has one long night. This is because it's situated at the bottom of the planet. So the National Science Foundation is who operates the 3 permanent stations and 2 research vessels for the Antarctica. And the Antarctic Support Contract is who the NSF has contracted, and that's who I work for and who Nancy works for, to provide support for all of the operations in Antarctica. And we also support operating locations on 4 continents. And I'll talk about that in just a bit. More than 30 scientific disciplines are represented on the ice. And under normal circumstances, over 3,000 people deploy to Antarctica. Of course, this year is unique because of COVID. Far fewer people have deployed to Antarctica, and we have been very, very careful because we don't want to be the ones to bring COVID to the ice. So in general, our entire mission is to push the bounds of human knowledge, and anybody who works for the program is really invested in that, as Nancy and I can both attest. So this is a great photo. I love this. It's sort of a demonstration and something to keep in mind as I'm giving my presentation. This photo, as a logistician, there are a couple of things that make me crazy about this photo. One of them is this this ice core box. It's upside down. You can't see its little arrows, but they are pointing to the ground. And every time I look at this photo, it makes me crazy. The other thing to notice about this photo is the guy who's standing here next to this ice core. He's wearing a Mylar suit. He's got plastic gloves on over his regular gloves, and he's wearing an N95 mask, not because of COVID, because what he's trying to do with his ice core right now is keep it from being contaminated with anything that might be on his clothing or his hands, and keep it from being contaminated by his breath. The ice cores, the reason they take ice cores is to look at what the atmosphere was doing thousands of years old. So these ice cores are really old. So he's in the process of fixing to put this ice core in this bag, and then it would be put into a box, and then it would be shipped ultimately to the National Ice Core Lab, which is in Lakewood, Colorado. Actually, I think it's in Golden. And when you're looking at this picture, this train here, this black box is where people eat their food and work, and then the little Quonset hut is where they're doing sort of their scientific stuff. And this big pallet of things right here are ice core boxes, hopefully with their arrows up. And then the tractors are what pull this train from place to place. So when you're thinking about the presentation, think about, how did these people get there? How did this stuff get there? How are these things going to get off the ice? And you know, how do mundane things like this pen? How did this pen get to Antarctica? I'm going to talk about that. So with regard to operational logistics, in North America, our primary shipping hub is in Port Hueneme, California. It's a military base, of course. And our headquarters, the ASC headquarters, is in Denver, Colorado. And that's where most of our procurements and the full-time management are based. And then the National Science Foundation is in Arlington, Virginia. And we also have a small contingent that's focused on science planning that's also in Arlington. Now remember, it's not just movement of stuff, it's movement of people. So typically people fly to Los Angeles, California if they're going to McMurdo and South Pole and Deep Field. And they fly from LA, they go to Auckland, that's where they enter New Zealand. And then from Auckland, they go down to Christchurch, New Zealand, where they would pick up extreme cold weather gear, which we call ECW. And then most folks will fly on a C-17 or an LC-130 to McMurdo, and then deploy from McMurdo to South Pole or Deep Field, or just work in McMurdo. Now, if they were going to the peninsula side of Antarctica, the people would fly actually to Dallas, Texas. And then from Dallas, they would go to Santiago, Chile. And then from Santiago, they would be flown down to Punta Arenas. We lovingly just refer to that as PA. The cargo, the gear that gets sent to, oh, by the way, our research vessels take people from PA to Palmer Station. So if we're sending materials are going to go from Port Hueneme, and they're going to be shipped commercial surface or commercial air to Santiago, Chile. And by the way, the materials are shipped commercial surface, commercial air to Christchurch, New Zealand, or on the McMurdo South Pole side, we have an annual vessel, a large vessel, resupply vessel that departs from Port Hueneme, goes to Christchurch, bunkers at Christchurch, and bunkering means to take on fuel. And then it goes from Christchurch to McMurdo, which is on an island, Ross Island, as a matter of fact. But if you're going to the peninsula, things would be sent commercial surface to Santiago, or commercial air, primarily commercial surface, and then either trucked or sent commercial surface to PA, and then would be loaded onto our research vessels, along with the people and the scientists, which are not exclusive. Of course, scientists are people too. And then they would go on the research vessels down to Palmer Station. Just a quick view of the stations. McMurdo is on Ross Island. It's located, you can see where it's located on the map. Under normal circumstances, about 800 people go there on average weekly, 2,300 total. During the pandemic, we're going to top out at only 340 people, period. You can see highs and lows, and the season is early October to February, March. There's a picture of a C-17, which is the primary people mover and also cargo mover from Christchurch, New Zealand to McMurdo Station. And I was telling you about our annual resupply vessel. It delivers 7.5 million pounds of cargo typically and removes 6.5 million pounds of retrograde over 500 containers. We have a semi-annual tanker of fuel. You can see the air transportation and then missions typically go to and from Christchurch and on continent. Here's my favorite bird, the LC-130. And notice the skis on these birds. The NSF, I believe, is the only one to own LC-130s. I think there are only 9 of them. And the Air National Guard out of Schenectady runs them, operates them. My favorite plane. It's a tactical aircraft. There is an icebreaker needed to get into the Sound. And there's a picture of our resupply vessel. It doesn't have any containers on it. And an icebreaker there. And this to the right of the ship that's moored is an ice pier made out of ice, as it sounds. And here is a map of where scientists are going during a typical season. And we use LC-130s, and we use Bachelors, which is a DC-3T, a turbocharged DC-3, or Twin Otters to get people into the deep field. And we also use A-Star helicopters for that. Early in the season, we use L-100 for weather things that we have going on in McMurdo. And every now and again, with quid pro quo, if I can say it correctly, with the New Zealand government, we'll get an A319 or a B757 to help deliver people from Christchurch to McMurdo. I actually prefer the C-17s. And there we are at my hometown, South Pole Station. Weekly average 150, 450 total. I must say that with COVID, we're going to have maybe 45 people there this year during the summer. The average highs, the record high -7. I was there that year when we had a record high of -7, and believe me, you get used to the very cold. I was out building Air Force pallets on that particular day. I had my Carhartts on, my heavy boots on, a thermal long sleeve shirt, gloves, and a hat. I worked like that all day. It was fabulous. The sun, the sunshine, the fresh air. It's a really wonderful, wonderful day to be alive. There's the Herc, and this is cargo that's actually coming out of it. And most of the vehicles that we use are prime movers, are tracked vehicles, you can imagine, in the snow. We this year, we don't have any LC-130s bringing people and cargo to South Pole because of COVID. We're moving people only by Bachelor, and we're moving cargo by the overland traverse. And normally we do like 2 overland traverses to move fuel, and these the things that the tractors are pulling are fuel bladders, but the tractors this year are also bringing cargo. So understand one of the huge operational challenges for South Pole Station. We have a limited window for cargo operations. LCs can only fly in weather that's warmer than -50, and Bachelors can fly in weather that's just a little tiny bit colder than that. And so we are really limited by what our operations can do. And of course, because we only have one long day and one long night, all of our operations are during the day, not at night. So here's Palmer Station. I don't have the trifecta. Nancy has the trifecta. I have never been to Palmer. Hopefully one day I'll get to go. We consider Palmer, and you can see where it is on the map here, in the banana belt. You can see the average high is 36 and the winter low is typically around 14, and this is in Fahrenheit. They have more of a year-round operation, but they do have a definite summer season, early October through April. We go to them, and there's the pier. We go to them about once a month with a resupply vessel, and of course we use our science vessels to do resupply and to move people, as well as to do science. And here's a description of our science vessels: the Nathaniel B. Palmer, typically referred to as the MVP, and the Lawrence M. Gould, the LMG. And they are ice class, they are icebreakers. And ice class 1 means that the LMG can go anywhere, any time of the year, through any kinds of ice. Ice class 2 means that they can go anywhere, any time of the year, but they have to be careful about the kind of ice. They can go through some multi-year ice. It's better if they're single year, but you know, they do a good job. Looking at our business capabilities, you can imagine we use Maximo for a lot of things: procurement, inventory management, asset management, mission management, and we have cloned the asset application to help us with this. And with mission management, I mean manifesting missions, air missions, manifesting resupply missions on the surface. We use it to track people too. So, and with tracking cargo, we need to understand where is all of the cargo in its journey from Port Hueneme, for instance, to South Pole. Mobile's reasonably new for us. We're using, we have a couple of applications that we use. One is for tracking cargo. The new one this year that we've just rolled out is for work management. And the biggest thing about these devices is that, pardon me, they have to be able to work offline. In a lot of ways, we are, pushing the bounds of human knowledge, but in many ways, our technology, just because of where we are, is still in the 90s. So, for instance, one of the technical challenges is McMurdo doesn't have Wi-Fi all over it. Palmer does have Wi-Fi, and South Pole is just like this week as we're talking, putting up APs to saturate the station with Wi-Fi. So these mobile devices have to be able to work offline in order to be usable. And then, of course, we're really driving toward reliability-centered maintenance, RCM. And that means we need to have better data. We need to understand the data that we need, and we need to be able to capture it and utilize it in Maximo to answer, the typical questions of RCM, which I've listed. So technical challenges: satellite communications through remote stations. South Pole only has 8 hours of satellite connectivity, and it is not contiguous. And by that, I mean, you might be connected to a satellite, and by the way, 3 satellites service us, and those are satellites that nobody else wants to use. They have to have an orbit that is decayed enough so that South Pole can see it. So back to South Pole's connectivity, they only have 8 hours of connectivity. It's not contiguous. And you might have connectivity for an hour and then nothing for a couple of minutes. And then you might have 15 minutes of connectivity and then nothing for 2-3 hours. And then you might have a really good burst of connectivity for 2 hours and then nothing for 15 minutes and then another 20 minutes of connectivity and so on. And this whole window of connectivity moves forward 4 minutes every day. So it's never the same. So it's a challenge, you can imagine. Data synchronization across the satellite links similarly plays into that satellite communications. And then, as I was talking, operability for the mobile devices in sub-zero temperatures. We had to have devices that would survive and like I was saying, be able to work offline. And then Maximo is not our while it is the system of record for procurement, what we use to buy things with, It is not the system of record for paying vendors. So we have had to create an interface to CostPoint, which is what Leidos uses to pay their vendors. And we have to create an interface in a remote secure DMZ in order to be able to do that. So data synchronization. That is the key. When before we had Maximo, we had a separate database in each station, and each station had separate item records, for instance, for their thing. So a Canopies would have one item record in McMurdo, a different item record in South Pole, and yet a different item record in Palmer. When we moved into Maximo, we needed to work on, everybody needed to have the same data. A Canopies would be the same item number, Palmer, South Pole, McMurdo, it didn't matter. So data synchronization is key to this very, very component. And it's especially challenging, as I described, due to our environment. We use a hub and spoke model. Data is synchronized every 15 minutes. And then synchronization can occur outside of the South Pole satellite windows, and then it's transmitted once the satellite windows open. And then data is compressed and optimized. And we have synchronization engines that fire on both ends simultaneously, and data collisions are resolved post-pass. So I'd like to kind of walk you through our journey. And this is a journey for the Vehicle Maintenance Center. And it's similar for facilities, but we're talking about transportation. So I'm going to focus on the maintenance, the VMF for short. When we first rolled Maximo out in 2014, we printed every work order in paper, and that's what was provided to the technicians. And they recorded their labor time and their notes on the paper, and then gave that to the service writer, and the service writer would enter all that information into Maximo. And materials were issued by the supply counter. And as you can imagine, that was pretty onerous. And in addition to that, interestingly enough, we almost ran out of paper that first season, and we did run out of toner. And in the waste stream, you know, everything you bring into Antarctica, you got to take out of Antarctica, and that includes waste. And we also have to recycle everything that we send out if we can. So the waste stream, we were not prepared to recycle all of this paper, and it was kind of funny. It was something that we didn't think about when we first rolled it out. So the next year we're like, no, we can't do that. We can't do that again. So the VMF decided they had to go paperless, and they did. And so work orders were generated. They were assigned to the technicians, and the technicians now had to go into Maximo and enter their time and into the actuals tab and their labor notes into the log. But they didn't have computers in their work area, so they had to go, interestingly enough, to the library. And that was 52 steps from the VMF to the library to get to a computer, and 52 steps back. And so, you know, they would save up time. They would typically go at the end of the day and enter all their stuff. And it really took away from turning the wrenches like that's what they're supposed to be doing. And materials were still issued by the supply counter, but we were having problems getting the right materials issued to the right work order. So we're like, we got to fix this. This is not going to work. So in 2016, one of the things we did was we implemented transportation, and that gave us a bunch of things. It gave us mechanics clipboard. It allowed us to use aliases. Something else that we did was we put computer stations, workstations at every station in the VMF, vehicle maintenance facility. And I have a picture here of that. And that allowed the technicians to enter their labor and logs directly into Maximo when it was happening. So we were getting information in real time. And we also devised personalized training, because of course, anybody who's used Maximo can be a little daunting at first when you're working on it. It's really important to get that training piece down. And in order to get the right parts issued to the right work orders, we issued very strict process for issuing parts. So when the guys went to the supply counter to get parts, they had to have the work order number and the asset number. And the alias, I brought up alias, it made it a lot easier for them to find their assets using alias. Of course, the asset would be represented in the work order, but if they wanted to get set up, they could find their asset using the alias. And then we also added components, and this allowed the supervisors to use component codes for failure reporting. And of course, 2017, we're in that season, 17, 18, we wanted to get more into reporting and utilizing the data that's in Maximo to better ends. And of course, as we've progressed, it's all about data. And we wanted to try to move from a reactive mode, as you guys I'm sure can all appreciate, into more of a preventive mode. And so we used classifications and attributes. All of the rolling stock got classified with attributes, and this allowed us to develop fleet health start centers. So that was great. At the end of the day, the supervisors could see what his or her guys had done and the health of the fleet as it stood at that point. And we also restructured job plans. And then the next season, we upgraded from our original Maximo to 761, and we started using Power BI to show fleet condition based on Maximo data. And we have telemetric data on the fleet, telemetrics, and we started putting telemetric data into the area where Power BI could pick it up, and we could show that. We could integrate that into our fleet health, which was pretty interesting. And we could also use fuel data, because we have a fuel master that shows how much fuel each of these assets is using. And we could put that into the data lake. And the telemetrics allowed us to look at idle versus work time. And that was pretty helpful. So as we go on, here we are last season, we're looking at how we can upgrade the tablets in the garage. We're better refining the data in Maximo to better facilitate reporting and to move more toward that RCM state, that reliability centered maintenance state. And then this season we're rolling out, while we have had mobile devices for cargo in the system since we actually went live with Maximo, we are rolling out new mobile devices for work management. And one of the things that we want to do, that we want to move to, is instead of having our telematic data and our fuel data go into a lake, a data lake, we want to use APIs to put the data directly into Maximo and better utilize the tool as it's designed to be used, so that we have, a single pane of glass to look at. And we're also want to use, or start to use, Maximo data to populate GIS maps. And so here is an example of Power BI. And you can see all of the different kinds of vehicles that we have, and this is vehicle health. And you can see from this this shot that we get some problems with the quad tracks, and we get some problems with the trenchers, those pesky trenchers. Cool thing about Power BI is that in this dashboard, you can see the work orders that are in progress, the work orders that are completed, and the assets that aren't running. And these links would take you directly to, like if I wanted to look at this work order on Sparkles, this link would take us directly to the work order on Sparkles, and you could see what was going on. And of course, I've sanitized this for obvious reasons, but it would also show labor hours and material cost. It was for work orders in progress, and same for work orders that were completed. And then this one here, the asset not running details, you could see the assets, the models, its priority. Is it waiting for material, which you can imagine sometimes is a big deal, since it takes typically a really long time to get material from United States or Christchurch all the way down to McMurdo or South Pole or Palmer. So, and this also tells or shows how many days down. And then finally, other things that we want to do, we'd certainly like to look at Maximo and its ability to manage projects and work orders so that we can start looking at end-to-end science mission planning. And we'd like to enhance workflows and mobile support. For instance, we don't have an app for inventory. That's the next thing, next mobile that we want to roll out. And then finally, with the mobile device support, like I said, the next thing we want to roll out is inventory. We don't have Maximo on the vessels. Their bandwidth is so tiny that we're working on how we can get better bandwidth for the vessels while they were at sea, and then how we can utilize Maximo. So that is my presentation. But if we have time, I'd really like to show you this little video. Do we have time?
Unfortunately, we don't, Patty. This was a great presentation on opening up what you folks do up there. I mean, truly amazing and challenging as well, I know. Perhaps we could play the video at the very tail end of this, and I'll be able to capture that, and we can, if people want to view it later, they can view that as well.
Okay, yeah, it's about a minute long. It's really short.
So if you want to, hang on after the meeting, we'll just continue. We'll show the video, and then people can watch that as well. So, and I know IBM has a great solution for weather offering as well, which might be key for for the locations out there. So, all right, thanks so much, Patty. That was extremely informative. I had no idea what was going on up in Antarctica, and Airbnb. I don't think I would go there on a vacation anyway.
Hey, Scott, before you let Patty go, there is 2 questions in the chat.
We do have. Okay, go ahead, Bob.
First question was from Javier Garcia. Any reason to planning to use Power BI instead of Cognos?
Power BI is what we use. Cognos, I don't know much about Cognos. We use BERT for reporting. So I'm not sure that I can answer that question. We do put our data into a data lake, and that's what Power BI pulls from. So, and we have a variety of data sources.
Sounds good. And the other question from a few people is, what mobile work management product are you deploying in 2021?
We work with Interlock. They're the ones who are creating the apps. The mobile devices that we use are ZPro TC70Xs. So we've had really good luck with the Interlock apps.
Great.
Excellent.
Thank you, Patty.
Thanks, Patty. Thank you so much again for your presentation. Now, moving on, we've got Sponsor Spotlight. Projitech is going to talk a little bit about their More community, which is a great community out there. And I'll turn it over to Chris.
So, can you see my
There
screen?
you go. You're good, Chris. Okay, take her away.
Great. So first of all, thanks for this opportunity to speak on the More Maximo community. Also, thanks to ZPro for continuing to support the Transportation User Group. If you have a second screen handy, go ahead over to the moremaximo.com website and follow along. Even if you're not a member, because I'm actually going to talk about effectively both levels of access, and I'll show that as well. Just a little bit of information on Projitech. We are an IBM partner and have been for a while. We've also been deploying and delivering Maximo effectively from the cloud since 1999. So we've been at this for a bit. We have a number of clients in our cloud, a large number of virtual machines, Maximo instances. We have audited ISMS policies, so it's not just us that are looking at us. Not just IBM that's auditing us, but also external parties as well, because we want to try and stay current and secure and document that as well. One of the things that we've done last year was to build and deploy the Maximo online resources and education community. And a lot of what you will be able to see is going to be available to you even without being a member. And I'll separate that in a minute. But just some general information on why you might want to join. But like I said, if you have access to another window, just go ahead, open it up, and you can follow along. In general, what will happen before you join, you have access to the events information. So as people contact us and notify us about Maximo related events, and we try to keep everything Maximo focused, so those get filtered and just the Maximo events get posted. That'll include the registration link as well as other information that relates to it that we get from the sponsors for that event. There'll also be activities that people will put out a discussion or may just have a question. So there's a Q&A option as well. And popular content. There'll be a number of links that are going to be available for you to click on, and you'll be able to look at the content and whatever presentation media there was. It may be plain text, there might be a video attached, there may be attached files or documents. We try and make all of that available. You know, if it's a YouTube link, the link will be there or the video will be embedded. But just to give you one single place to go to capture that information. For those interested in certifications, IBM and Pearson made the Maximo 7.6 certifications available online. You can take from home. That they did. They did that sometime late last year. Eventually, somewhere in the fourth quarter, they got all three of them available. So there's information on that as well. So a video, some links to the documentation as well. And then there's an open forum, which is where most people will start and where a lot of time is actually spent. Now, once you do become a member, then you'll get some additional access to a number of resources that have been gathered and continues to be enhanced. And you will additionally have access to actually post your own discussion, get your own questions answered. You can manage your profile. You can check for subscriptions that you may want to subscribe to specific content, and you'll have flexibility to do that. And let's see with yes. So if you do have events that you want to have listed, just go ahead and send an email to contact@moremaximo.com. And as long as it's a Maximo event, we will go ahead and publish it. And that's pretty much, I think, the only criteria that we use. But let's go ahead and get a look in Maximo. So this is Maximo. You'll see I haven't logged in yet, but I do have access. There's recent activity here. There's popular content as an example. And actually, let me go ahead and refresh this and make sure nothing else actually. There is more here, but it's on the same item. So if I go down, you'll see there are a number of individual links in the popular content. And let's say, for example, I hit the end user and I grab an end user. Well, of course, it's one of mine, but I'll take a look at it. And in that particular one, there's a video here, which runs an hour. That's a long one. That's just me being windy. And of course, here we have a document. So I can actually click on the document. I'm using Firefox, so it wants to open it. And it actually opens in this window. Wow, that almost never happens. So it's the actual Word document. It could be a PDF. A lot of it, if it's easier here, then I'll just go ahead and put it in. And then I can actually go ahead and click on links. Now, in this particular document, it talks about things I can do without having a login, and then there are other things that are here that you actually need to have a login. But in this case, I'll just grab this one for events. Talked about that a little while ago. And security concern, yeah, I know that's where I'm going, and that's a good place to go. So I'll open it up. Of course, it opens in another browser, in another window. But it takes me to, well, look at here. there is this event.
Look at that.
Who knew? And there'll be other ones that are going to be here as well. There's quite a few that are here. Scott mentioned the pack mug coming up, so that's here, and I can go into that event, see a little other information, got a download link to my calendar, and I can look at a link that will actually take me to the registration page. So it's really, again, a community that is here to assist with things related to Maximo, and we'll continue to provide more and more around that. But this is all information that you have access to, and again, you haven't even logged in yet. Take a look at some of the things that you do when you log in. So let's go ahead and log in. Let's be, who am I today? Did I remember my password? I guess I did. So now I've got, it doesn't really look a lot different, right? But I do now have access to resources. So there's quite a bit of content that's there. And then these just continue to be enhanced as well. And I can look, I can click in an individual area and then just drill down into, a lot of these are YouTube videos, some are other attachments or documents. There'll be content that we get from a number of sources, including many of our business partners, and we'll continue to be able to post additional information there. And then a few other things just in general, if we look at, there it is, profile. So I mentioned you have access to manage things that are related to you. So you have a choice of email preferences in terms of what you want to list. You can opt out if you want. There are notifications, and you have control over the notifications that you get as well. You can document information on yourself and your profile. You can connect with other people in the community. So you'll have a number of contacts or networks. And right now, there's not really that many communities, but there will be a few more as we add on, depending on interest and what people are really looking at in terms of specific areas of concern. Lastly, I want to talk about is threads. This is a new modification, and there'll be one more to come somewhere in the first quarter. But this allows you to get a look at, and this is actually what was on the first screen that was recently updated. You can see this particular case for SMTP Relay Queue. Last updated a couple hours ago, just 3 replies. So there's numbers on here. Generally, you'll see discussions. In this case, it's more a specific question. And you have access to create as well as to respond to those. And yeah, I'll go ahead and stop now. Because I should really get Mark in here.
Mark needs to get in there and do his deal.
Yeah, and let's see, are there any questions that come up?
Don't have any that
Okay.
we see.
Great.
Patty with Antarctica did say that SRO is who they use for replication, just an FYI. So the More community, a great resource for you folks to check out. So if you have an opportunity and haven't already joined More, please do so. Again, some great communications and information there as well. So with that, let's turn it over to Mr. Mark Eaton.
Hi, folks. Can you hear me okay?
We can, Mark.
Nice. Chris, do you want to speak to these first couple of slides here?
Sure. Let's go ahead and pop over to the next one. So this is just going to be our basic agenda. I'm actually going to cover just the kind of the clarification on SaaS. It's not hosting, and look at some basic differences. And actually what I'll do is I'll create a post in the More Maximo community, and we'll post these as well as Scott having access to them to send out and to make available through the Transportation Maximo User Group. Mark's going to then take over, specifically talk about what lift and shift is, some preparation for the cloud, things that typically can move, and then there's going to be some referenceable links that you can use to click on and then look at more detail that we certainly can't really cover in the 30 minutes. Mark, when you get in the next slide. So this is actually a Gartner slide. It's an old one, but we've sort of latched on to it because it really kind of covers the difference and actually looks at some of the different areas of how far you go into the cloud. Traditional on-premise is on the left, SaaS, which is our models, on the right. So basically, ProjectTech as a company manages everything except the data. The data is managed by the client, and then data access is provided to them at both application and table level so that they can do their own reports and whatever BI tool that they choose to use. And then we just manage essentially everything else. Now, PaaS for platform as a service or IaaS for infrastructure as a service, those are additional levels that are available to you. So it really kind of comes down to when you move to the cloud, you'll also want to know to what level you're actually moving, and all of the options are available, as well as what is traditionally known as hosting. And at this point, I think I'll just turn it over to Mark, and you can take over, Mark, on the next slide.
Thanks, Chris. So folks, again, I'm Mark Eaton. I'm going to talk to you about lift and shift. Lift and shift is a kind of a generic IT term that speaks to moving systems that are on-premise to a cloud platform of some type. It's called lift and shift really because there's a focus on moving in a like-for-like manner. So really you're just picking the application, whatever it is that you're going to lift and shift, you're just picking it up and essentially moving that to your target cloud platform. Some of the benefits of doing a lift and shift really focus on change management and managing the risks associated with that change. If you're picking up Maximo as an example and you're doing a lift and shift to the cloud and you keep it on the same version, essentially your users may have a different URL, depends on how it's implemented, may have a different URL to access, but by and large, if it's the same version of Maximo, they're gonna see the same behavior from the application that they're working in, and really minimizes the amount of change to them. It also limits the amount of risk that you're taking on. Certainly, there are things technically that you have to consider to lift an application up and move it onto a cloud platform. And if you change less, then there's less risk associated with that move. So another benefit generally is if you're able to lift and shift, generally you're going to be able to do that quicker, and you're going to get to faster time to value of really that lift and shift move. So what is ProjectTech lift and shift? Really, it's just what we just talked about, but it's really our methodology for doing a lift and shift of Maximo systems to our cloud platform. Really, the goal of that lift and shift for many people is to relinquish some of the support activities and upgrade responsibilities and those types of things. That's really what you get with our solution. After we've picked up your system, we've shifted into our cloud and our platform. Essentially, we'll take on support and upgrade responsibilities at that point. What that gives you is the ability to stay on current product without having additional costs moving forward. You know, the technical upgrade, patching and upgrade of Maximo would be included in our service moving forward. So just helps level out some of those cost spikes that have to do with upgrading. We really handle everything underneath the application, well, the entire stack. So as we're moving you to newer versions of the Maximo product, we're also keeping all of that underlying infrastructure and middleware in sync and current as well. So with the lift and shift, what if you have a Maximo application on-prem, what versions can you lift and shift? We can really deal with anything Maximo 7.5 and higher. Certainly Maximo 7.5 and frankly here in 2021, Maximo 7.6 will be at end of support as well. And so we certainly wouldn't want to run a desupported software for too long. We would definitely want to have a plan for getting you onto current and supported product, but we can support a lift and shift at a version 7.5 level. All right, so things that you can really do if you're looking at being able to move to cloud and lift and shift as a methodology specifically, there probably are a few things that you're going to want to make sure that you're focused in on to be able to make that transition as smooth as possible. A big one really is going to be your integrations. If you have any integration with Maximo, then you really want to make sure that you're documenting those integrations fully. And when I say fully, really it's a focus on network protocols, ports, data flow, direction, those types of things. When you're on-prem, obviously you're most likely all on your company network, and there are network control rules and stuff that are in place to separate your backend network, corporate network from the portion of the network that your users are on, all of that type of stuff. So much of that, if you're dealing with integrations, much of that you still have to consider. So you want to make sure that you've documented all of your integrations, any of the communications that you have that are outside of Maximo communicating with the database or other middleware components that you're going to be lifting and shifting with Maximo, then you're going to want to have those things documented. If you're, I've got this labeled as new integrations, but I think it's key to really start to talk about making your Maximo application cloud friendly. And by cloud friendly, I just mean securing communications between Maximo and other systems using secure APIs and protocols that you can secure and still do that over the public internet. So part of dealing with integrations certainly would be, we would, so I want to go back to the statement, we would strive for you using an HTTPS integration, whether with, the entire framework is moving towards REST API and securing that with an API key. So if you're building a new integration, certainly we would recommend that you would look to do it using that type of endpoint. And it really just eliminates the need for a site-to-site VPN. Most of the time when you're dealing with your corporate network team, a VPN is looked at as a risk because you're exposing a portion of your network to a third party. And there are, companies are all over the place from the standpoint of how strict they are around these types of things. But our experience has been with IT security teams is that they'd like to eliminate VPNs as much as they can. So if you move to a REST API with an API key, that would be one integration you wouldn't have to deal with from the standpoint of trying to figure out networking and that type of stuff. If you are looking to redevelop any of your integrations, again, I think the same thing applies. Cloud friendly would be moving towards an HTTPS REST API using that API key. We do support really all the different types of endpoints that Maximo supports. So HTTPS via REST or web service, those are certainly supported. Table integrations are supported generally. Those require, require a VPN, especially if the tables exist in like a on-prem ERP system as an example. If you're integrating to Oracle Financials on-prem, then a table integration would be something you might have to deal with, and we'd probably want to secure that over a VPN as well, or it'd be required to be those network communications to be secured over a site-to-site VPN. File-based integrations, certainly Maximo has the ability to consume those. We stand up an SFTP site for as a middle layer to be able to deal with file transfers and that kind of stuff. I think by and large, those are fine. We don't find those to be quite as easy to support as HTTPS, those types of endpoints, but certainly we do support those. LDAP, I list this as an integration, really only because it is generally an integration point that requires a VPN. Sometimes you'll have companies that'll use an Azure AD, a Microsoft Azure AD service, and Office 365 for email, that type of stuff. And sometimes we can use an LDAP-S, secure LDAP connection with an Azure service, something where they're whitelisting an IP address. Those are possibilities, but most of the time, if you're looking at LDAP, you're looking at the need for a VPN as well. Really, that takes us into this next slide as well, because when you're talking about kind of the future of cloud applications, really today the current standard is a SAML authentication mechanism. So Maximo and WebSphere do support that SAML authentication type. It's taken a while for that to be really fully ferreted out through the framework, but now in later versions of Maximo, they've addressed some of the issues like e-signature and some of those things that weren't compatible with a SAML only authentication profile. LDAP again really does generally require direct access to an Active Directory or to an identity provider that uses LDAP as the protocol. And again, IT folks see that as a big security risk. So as you're moving to cloud, I would really recommend that you look at SAML authentication as the means for doing that. Part of what SAML gives you is also the ability, most of the time, with your identity provider, you have the ability to tie into and to implement multi-factor authentication ahead of your Maximo login. So think about logging into your corporate SSO service or single sign-on type service, and then as you log into that single sign-on service, it would ask you to verify a code that's sent to your phone, as an example. You type in that code, and then it logs you into your identity provider with that single sign-on access. Then Maximo is just a link within that service. You click on it, it'll take you directly into Maximo. It already knows who you are and what your authorizations are based on Maximo security. So really, SAML we view as the future from an authentication perspective. So starting to think about that early, I think would be a good idea. If you have mobile solutions, some of them support SAML and some of them don't. I think ultimately, any of them that want to be around long-term, be viable long-term, we'll have to consider that. But it's just something, it's a point to where any application that you're going to lift and shift and move to the cloud that's going to use Maximo as part of its authentication mechanism, you definitely want to make sure that those are those support the authentication mechanism that you're going to employ. We certainly do support LDAP, SAML, and native authentication. All of those are supported. We're really just trying to push people away from LDAP for all of the reasons that I just spoke to. Okay, only a few more slides here, folks. Preparing for lift and shift. Again, I think it's important just to stress that if you're going to hand over the support activities and upgrade activities over to a third party, certainly they are, and we would be interested in your configuration practices using some best practices and configuration standards. Naming standards are important, column naming, attribute naming, and using prefixes to avoid collisions with new Maximo features that might be delivered by IBM over time. Those are important. Certainly, automation scripts have come a long way. They continue to be improved in the hooks into the different portions of the Maximo framework. But in the end, whether or not it's custom Java code or it's custom, it's automation scripts, but bad code, bad coding practices, bad code is bad code. Automation scripts certainly eliminate the need for you to recompile a custom Java class, but in the end, if it's doing bad things or not appropriately doing things, the same type of rules apply to writing custom Java. So that would be something that you should always have your eye on if you're continuing to write automation scripts. We think that would be a good idea. And finally, really just avoid business logic at the database layer. I grew up with Maximo 4, and it's pretty common back with 4.1.1 to implement database triggers and stuff to do some, things where you wanted to do something Maximo didn't need to know about it. Really, there's no good reason to implement database layer code anymore. We recommend we really only support business logic that's at the application layer. So we really would recommend that you don't implement any customizations at that database layer. Again, we do support configurations that adhere to known best practices. That's the goal. Certainly, it's hard to ferret all of that out as you're coming in the cloud. I think if you're looking to move, it's just a good idea to look at the practices that you're employing. We probably wouldn't say no if you've got some bad stuff in there and stuff that you want to improve on. Certainly, we'd be happy to help you make improvements after you move into our cloud. And we do not, again, support anything that's at the database layer. So things that can and should move. I think this is close to the last slide here, and I'll just blow through this. Really, you're going to need to provide a full copy of your database. Most everything in Maximo these days is contained in the database from a configuration perspective. Linked documents are still outside of the database. So from a data perspective, application data perspective, those two would have to be handed over. And you'd need to provide information and source code for custom Java, any custom libraries you need to be able to access. Really, it's any change to that Maximo deployment. So when you're building and deploying your Maximo or anything that you're putting in that SMP folder, any changes there, make sure that you've got those documented because those would need to be handed over as well. Really, the other thing that we often do see moved and lifted and shifted with their Maximo application is the mobile application itself. If there are server-side components that you need run and they're going to run better sitting right next to Maximo, then generally that application you'd lift and shift with Maximo as well. So data splice would just be one example of a mobile app, but really most of those mobile applications would perform a little better if they're sitting right next to Maximo. Whether they're if it's an RMI application, certainly would need to be packaged up and moved that direction. If it's REST OSLC, generally you've got some choices there. So that's really it. There are some links that are provided as part of the presentation as well. And that is all I have, Scott.
Excellent. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Chris. Appreciate that. So what I'd like to do is I'd like to extend a big thank you to all the presenters and sponsors today. If you'd like to schedule a follow-up conversation around any of the featured presentations or spotlights, please send me a note. And as mentioned earlier, you can access this recorded webinar on the IBM Transportation Community website and the ZPro Solutions website event page, as well as the More community. Also, you're able to stay informed on any of the upcoming events, including the January 21st IBM ZPro Roundtable Discussion Group. We'll be taking a deep dive into the Maximo Asset Management Scheduler. And then on January 27th, we've got the Pacific Maximo User Group webinar as well, in conjunction with the EDI partners. So lastly, please reach out to me if you'd like to be involved with our next spring transportation meeting this April. We're already in the planning stages and we've got some great presentations and demos already lined up. So if you'd like to hang on for a few minutes, Patty is going to be showing the video, short video associated with the Antarctica program. So with that, take care, stay safe, and thank you all for attending, and we'll see you at the next meeting. Patty?
Okay. Let me see my screen okay?
It's coming.
Let me know
Okay.
when you're set.
Yeah, see, you still see your desktop.
Okay.
It's beautiful, though.
Oh, that's what I want to know, is if you could see what I was presenting.
Yeah. That's a big bird.
Yep, this is what I used to do for a living when I was logistics manager.
Guess that's runway number 1, eh?
The only runway. Flight deck, this is cargo. With your permission, I'd like to show it one more time and just quickly talk about what's happening.
Sure.
If you guys don't mind. So the first thing to understand is those guys right there, those are fuelies. And they're going to park the plane. So the guy on the side is going to inform the guy at the nose when the wing gets to right about where the guy on the side is. And understand that these aircraft are bringing the South Pole Station fuel, which is AN8. It's a special Antarctic blend, and it's basically kerosene. That is what the station runs on. So the fuelies are going to park the plane, and then they're going to set out these little pylons, because this is an engines running operation the whole time. They don't turn the plane off because it's so cold. So they set the pylons out so those pesky passengers don't get into trouble. Passengers can be terribly pesky, as one might imagine, on the flight deck. We get rid of them. Now, the fuelies, so the nozzle they just brought out, they have to keep the nozzle warm. So they just brought it out and they're hooking it up to the hose, because if it gets cold, it's not going to seal to the aircraft and we're going to have leakage. And we don't want to have any fuel leak onto the ground, as you can imagine. Fuelies just went up and now they're connecting. And notice the guy standing at the front of the aircraft. He's actually got a headset and a really long cord, and he is working as a flight deck safety for the aircraft. And so he's in communication with the pilot at all times. And the guy with the snow machine standing there next back to the end of the aircraft, that's typically what I did, working as a safety for the cargo side. And you can see the tractor coming up to pull the Air Force pallet that is on the ramp. We got to pull the ramp pallet off. We do just pull the ramp pallet off. Now, in order to get the rest of the pallets off the aircraft, we use our tracked loader and we push this slide up to the ramp. We got to make sure the ramp is at the right height, and then we push the pallets off the aircraft. Now we got to put our upload on, the stuff that we're going to get rid of. And all this time you can see that they are defueling the aircraft. All this happens in 30 minutes or less. There we are, uploading the aircraft, off the aircraft, push that pallet back on, they lock it into place. Second pallet, and notice we finished with the fueling. So we brought, or defueling rather. So we got the fuelies are done. And they just took the nozzle to put back into the fuel shack, which you can't see. And by the way, if there's any loose load, then they give the loose load. You can see now there's something in that little sled behind the snow machine. So they give the person who's working on the ground the loose load. We dump it in the snow machine.
Mm-hmm. And I did get a lesson on snow machines when I was working in Fairbanks in January. You don't call them snowmobiles.
No,
They are snow machines.
Yeah, snow machines. Snow machines. And then the one thing you couldn't really see, or maybe may not notice, is they typically, when they're, sometimes the skis get frozen to the ground because the exhaust is hot, believe it or not. You might think, it's really cold standing in that exhaust, working the back of the aircraft. It's not. Well, it's not that's relative. But the exhaust is actually pretty warm. So sometimes the skis freeze to the ground or to the snow. They get ready, they take off, and it's all good. Another good day done.
Awesome. Very good. Thanks for sharing that insight to the program. It's a fascinating program, and again, I know it takes time to put all these presentations together, and again, some really great feedback, great presentations for everyone. So with that, I'm going to sign off. So again, take care, stay safe, and thanks everyone for attending.
Sure. Thank you.
You bet. Bye-bye.